How much regard is still due to Game of Thrones these days? A cultural phenomenon at the time, it isn't certain if it still bears up. In fact, if I were to choose, I'd say House of the Dragon Season 2 is a far more accomplished and satisfying show. House of the Dragon Season 2 more than delivers on the world building of the first season, with brilliant characterization, pacing, dialogue, a serious and consistent tone, and lavish cinematography. Following King Aegon's coronation and the death of Queen Rhaenyra's son, House Targaryen is divided. In King's Landing, Aegon rules from the Iron Throne under the protection of the largest dragon in Westeros. From exile on Dragonstone, Queen Rhaenyra and her council contemplate their strategy. Civil war looms as both sides seek support from the great houses, amassing armies and dragons. Characterization. The characters have been written fulsomely, inviting speculation into their motives, their innate character and morality, their role within and loyalty to family, houses or orders, and the interesting liminal spaces as they lean into, find solace in, or waver over their commitments, in a world where places at court, prestige, and protection are often subject to the capricious whims of rulers or the agendas of rivals. In this prevailing atmosphere, we're liable to give characters a lot of leeway and allow for a great deal of moral ambiguity, or even clear-cut moral failure if we have a sense of them being decent on balance, or their charisma and shrewdness makes them compelling to watch and we root for them as appealing anti-heroes, which a good many of the cast are. Within this is an implicit understanding. In a world of survival of the fittest, houses are unlikely to maintain their stature or resist being subsumed if the upper tiers of leaders aren't made of stern stuff, or Machiavellian and scheming, and able to make stark and pitiless decisions. Therefore it is, to a certain extent, in the interests of such houses to allow for the rise to prominence and favor of individuals who are at heart survivors, who have sharp instincts for when to bide their time and when to strike, and how to coddle rulers who are petulant, egotistical, and pliable. This keeps us involved, because a character like Otto Hightower, for much of the series The Hand of the King, we are suspicious of as a figure who harbors ambitions, but when his dogged persistence trying to reason with the young King Aegon is pushed to breaking point, his exasperated outburst and casting from favor reveals him in a more sympathetic light as a capable institutionalist. Larys Strong, the limping figure who has the air of the king and often subtly alters fate, gives the impression of orchestrating some larger plan, filling much of the role of Littlefinger in the Game of Thrones series. But he seems to have an institutional leaning towards the status quo too, which means we tend to tolerate him. Olivia Cooke's Alicent Hightower occupies an uncertain place within court at King's Landing, sitting on the council with a mind of her own but often talked over, trying to maintain some level of order and decency, but hardly a moral paragon herself. Ostensibly, Aegon, as king, seems to have the most agency, but the show is framed so that we understand Alicent and Rhaenyra are the two principals whose relationship will likely have the greatest bearing on the season. Olivia Cooke is great, but Emma Darcy as Rhaenyra is superb, a worthy Golden Globe winner. Rhaenyra begins the series stricken with grief, looking for the remains of her son Luke, killed by Aemond, the aloof and menacing rider of the realm's most formidable dragon. Rhaenyra is the moral center of the show, contenting with her grief whilst beset with responsibilities and threats, and constantly having to master herself, show poise and restraint, both for her own sake and for the sake of conveying authority at the head of a council agitating for war. Her mannerisms and pauses convey a great deal. Her fleeting expressions of compassion and concessions are rewarding because they are fleeting. This characterization makes her compelling to watch in all scenarios, as duty presses upon her, the growing, even brazen insistence of her advisors for more brutal action, and her own latent desires for such, are kept in check by a judicious sense of her overall precarious position, and her deeper instincts for some kind of resolution that might ward off mass bloodshed. Amid all this is Rhaenys, a passed-over noble whose lack of involvement and consequence actually makes her an interesting addition, as above all the intrigue as she is at a remove from it. She provides an emotional and reflective support role to Rhaenyra, and, at a subtle level of characterization, a practical role for the audience to get insights into Rhaenyra's thinking. There is also Princess Helaena, an intriguing counterpoint to Alicent Hightower. Helaena is abstracted, brittle, and speaks in distant and half-comprehending ways, with the viewer gleaning poignant little flashes among the ephemera. She is a strange, diminished figure who nonetheless attracts a lot of pathos because of the way actress Fia Saban plays her. With Rhaenyra established as the rock around which much of the drama is occurring, it is another great balance of characterization that we have scenes featuring Matt Smith's Daemon, who gets to be a chaos agent, a maverick, a disruptor, and to cause massive swerves in the plot. Sneaking into King's Landing, he bribes a rat catcher and a city watch guard to kill Aemond. Unable to find Aemond in the Red Keep, the two enter Princess Helena's quarters and instead murder the little boy Jaehaerys. As perhaps the best example of characterization, Daemon moves from self-absorption and moral indifference to trying to take the mantle and be decisive, out of deep-seated loyalties, or a lingering sense of having a point to prove as a potential but spurned heir, or intractable changeability and inconsistency, or some mixture of all of these elements. His latent motivations are always a treat to speculate over. Pacing. Surprisingly little happens in the first 3 episodes. A bungled attempt at reprisal leading to the death of a child, machinations at court, off-screen minor skirmishes and battles, and a covert meeting between Alicent and Rhaenyra. But the tension and pacing is sustained by a brilliant mounting sense of war about to break out on a massive scale, and of the opportunity to de-escalate fading rapidly away. There is the tension of the massive risk and fallout of a first vast strike, the teetering balance of minor houses prospectively shifting en masse depending on the strategic outlook and their interests. And, above all this, figuratively and literally, the dragons, which in this show are of such an order of magnitude as weapons they are almost akin to a modern nuclear arsenal, serving as a deterrent on both sides, whose power would incite mutually assured destruction, and whose deployment is held back, with the potential for an inadvertent or unsanctioned use leading to a chain reaction that would extend beyond control and any rules of decency. Even here there are tiers, with the largest dragons analogous to nuclear weaponry, and the smaller dragons more like aircraft carriers, dominating a region or patrolling close to home. So, while the action is limited, the ratcheting of the tension and stakes over several episodes is not something to be borne through, but rather to be reveled in, because the payoff and disorder and violence to come will be earned, and we, as viewers, will have a comprehensive understanding of the fairly elaborate and intricate alliance system and parts each main character will have to play. We will also care about them as the chaos ensues. Because the characterization is so strong, the dialogue so sophisticated, and the look of the show so lavish, we are quite happy to watch things unfold at a measured pace. Blocking. The show distinguishes itself from so much dross in our screens because it is framed and blocked with such professional sensitivity and care. Establishing shots, rather than being static, often involve following a protagonist, or even an extra through a bustling environment, sometimes with a passing mid-flow to another character and pivoting to a different direction. The interiors are often vast, the spaciousness and depth perspective appealing to the viewer, and direct top-down shots used frequently to show power relations or isolation. Light naturalistically has a gloss and gleam, at times looking like a Rembrandt or a Caravaggio, and exteriors a constant pallid glare. Dilapidated castles are everywhere in disrepair. Characters at night are positioned thoughtfully with their faces balanced by gloom and glow. During conversation, figures are positioned in ways extending beyond the conventional over-the-shoulder back and forths, with Rhaenyra and Rhaena framed here, for example, with poses of intimate confidence, but in an interesting, slightly removed relation. Here, Rhaena, again with partner Corlys, are framed interestingly and intimately. During their interactions, characters are often involved with some other task, or their attention divided. It is dynamic. The viewer is constantly engaged, camera movement is unobtrusive, and the CGI is limited, tasteful, and well integrated. There are feature tableaus, like the brothel, where the camera takes in all the action, and inns, where the merriment and dinginess is rowdy, and the sound well mixed. Dialogue. The characters who are highborn speak with a courtly formalism when it suits, especially when addressing lasses, and also when wanting to bring up a wall of critical distance when shunning those who have betrayed them emotionally or proven untrustworthy. It is a way of placing them at a figurative arm's length. Those lower-born have a crassness and vulgarity, and their speech is peppered with enjoyable images and analogies about cocks and shit and bastards. Dialogue is also used as a legitimizer. Sonoya Mizuno's Mysaria is a former whore and spy trammeled by society, but her language is assured, giving her gravitas and showing she has a shrewd mind and worthy of being heard by Rhaenyra. Daemon and other men are given the quality that so few modern screenwriters in a flaky Hollywood milieu are able to manage. The play with silent regard, the masculine trait of assessing what someone has said, weighing it up in a silence that is measured and unhurried, as an expression of power through ironic contemplation, a rhythm intrinsic to how men interact. Beneath every conversation in the show, there are other dynamics at play, which is a credit to the writers. House of the Dragon Season 2 is a marked improvement from the already impressive first season. The world building, jumps in decades, and the slightly overwrought drama that hindered the show initially are no longer an issue. This is a high-quality spectacle, an established world, sure of itself and tonally consistent, mixing court drama with visceral body horror, Shakespearean dramatic tones with high fantasy elements, and all bound together with great acting. It's a sure recommendation from me.